stop recording. So if you need to restart anything, remember this is going to be post-edited anyway.
Talk a minute? Or is it on and we're
Oh,
going?
he's going to edit it.
It's on and it's going.
And I'm not gonna talk.
When
You
he says,
gotta roll
when
into
he
this.
says
You
it,
can't just like,
We're rolling now. so-
Right.
oh,
okay.
it's on.
So,
All right.
go ahead.
Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Origins and Early Years of High School Wrestling in Cincinnati. I'm Greg Klein, former Mount Healthy wrestler, 1965 to 8, and then from there wrestled at Purdue. I'll be serving as your moderator host this evening for today's panel discussions about the early years of amateur wrestling here in the Cincinnati area. My guests today are four gentlemen I've had the opportunity to wrestle against, coach with, broadcast with over the last 50 years. And between the four of them, they've got over 200 years experience. Ron Cardini, Dave Bean, Ron Lepker, Dick Murphy. So gentlemen, feel free to answer anything and talk about anything you want today. And we're going to talk about your personal experiences in high school wrestling here in the area and how things got started and what you did to further that. So Ron, since you're the first, Princeton High School, start us off.
Well, it was rough as usual. I came to Princeton, I think, I know it came in 63, but I think they had done something the year before. But there was no record of it, or even when I got there. But they had talked about the year before. They had a couple kids that went up to Dayton and placed. Terry Saturday was one that comes to mind because he was also a football player. So when I went there, I went as wrestling coach and assistant football coach, and another guy that's on the same level as us that came with me. Can't say his name now, but well, you guys all know him. Who replaced me as wrestling coach?
Don Walnick.
Don Walnick. Don
That was
and I
Dick Murphy
came.
that knew the answer to that question.
Yeah. Don came the same time I did, and later went back to Miami to get his master's. So that's the only time we weren't coaching together, both in wrestling and in football. But it was kind of typical for what everybody did. You didn't have a wrestling room. You had an area that you were partly entitled to. For us, it was the gym balcony. We had half of the gym balcony and gymnastics had the other half. The only thing was there was only one set of mats. So we got Ferd Macchioli was the gymnastics coach, so said, Ferd, do you want to go first or last? And he said, I'll go first. And I knew he would because he liked to get out of there. So Ferd would go first and we would go into the pool balcony and lift weights. Or on every other day, we'd go out and run maybe the cross-country course or someplace. And they would use all the mats and all the gym space. And then when it came through, we would pull the mats together, put a mat cover over it, and have a wrestling room. And what I liked about it is you could stay as late as you wanted to. So if we were having wrestle-offs or anything, I didn't have to get off of there. So the gymnastics could have it. But we existed and we did well, and it was fun. We even wrestled matches up there because, God forbid, basketball would let you into basketball. You know, they had 17 teams fighting for one court. So we didn't get down there till maybe my second or third years, big time, when we got to wrestle down in the gym.
How about you, Ron? You're the next most senior guy.
Well, I worked at Procter & Gamble, and while I was working there, I went and got my degree, and I wrestled in the Army. I never wrestled in high school, but loved it. And when I got out of the Army, there wasn't much going on in Cincinnati as far as wrestling goes. I went to the Y over in Covington, and they talked about well, there should be some wrestling in the high schools, and really I kind of lost track. I don't know really actually how it started. There was a meeting at Muller High School, and I'm kind of fuzzy on that, what they decided to do, but how it went from nothing to programs where they started the programs. Maybe somebody here on this panel can fill me in on that lost time.
Now, you started at Coleraine.
I started a program Coleraine and Indian Hill. And I coached at St. X, and I'll tell you what, I was making a lot more money at Procter & Gamble, but I loved what I did. I'm happy that I had a great career, wonderful career. Lots of good kids, lots of good people, and I'm really happy I made that move.
Dave, how about you? Dave Bean?
Well, I can support a lot of what Ron just said. I started at Princeton as a student teacher in '63. That's when I got to see my first high school wrestling match, right in the place you were talking about, up there on that gym balcony.
Jim balcony.
I didn't wrestle in high school. I didn't wrestle in the Army. I never wrestled. I showed up at Finneytown as an assistant football coach. And I was a line coach. And I decided probably in '64 that we really needed to have something for linemen to do that didn't make them look like idiots on the field because they couldn't move their feet. So I remembered his wrestling program, and so in '67 I finally convinced the athletic director, hey, we need to have wrestling for these football players and get their foot speed up and things like that. Fortunately, our football coach didn't negate it. That happened all the time. It was so hard to get a lot of the big kids especially to wrestle because the football coaches are saying, oh no, you don't want to do that because you got to lose weight. Well, there was an issue that was unresolvable except for the coaches that really understood what was going on. So in 1967, I convinced the athletic director to buy a mat that conformed to the rules of the sport. 24 feet square. That's what the rule book said. So we bought a 24-foot square mat. And that mat, I thought, was all we needed until we had our first meet. And the referee came in and he looked around and he said, oh, this mat's not legal. I said, well, here it says right in the book. He said, yeah, but read the next sentence. It says you got to have 5 feet perimeter. So we had to run around the gym and find pieces of matting to lay down around it and try and tape them in. We spent half the time chasing the side mats that slid away from the main mat.
Do you remember who that ref was?
Yeah, sure. It was not Glenn Sample.
Kurt Ruckle.
Kurt Rocker.
Kurt Rockle.
Kurt Rocker.
The other thing, that was a square mat. Not now everything's a round,
Yeah,
circular
that's true.
mat.
Yep.
They've changed the style of the
Yeah,
mat
because you
itself.
could get them into a corner on a square mat. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. So, and I was selling wrestling equipment, and some of the coaches thought that if they didn't buy my equipment, they wouldn't get the right calls on the mat, which may or may not have been true. But
It was definitely true.
but Denny and I, we must have sold thousands and thousands of pair of shoes, and
And I bought you thousands of beers.
that's right. Well, that's right too. We did drink a lot of beer, didn't we, Murph?
Well, Dick Murphy, how'd
You're
you
talking
get?
me?
Yeah, how'd you get started then? Since
There's a lot of similarities between that we all have. You know, where we wrestled, you know, is definitely a similarity. You know, you find the place you could fit, you know, and I've wrestled on balconies, I've wrestled in cafeterias, I've wrestled in classrooms, and you learn to move your mats. And I can remember, and there were guys that have worked with me and wrestled in our area. And if we had to move mats to practice, we had to go up 4 flights of stairs to the top of the school at Western Hills High School because we practiced in the cafeteria. And the only way down to the gym was the back stairs. And there were like a lot of stairs. And we just got the guys.
And not
and
much width.
not much width, and you had to make turns and things. And
You also didn't need weight training because you got the weight training and your conditioning on that stairway.
yeah, that was a hard sell. And it still would be. But those were the days when wrestling was new to everybody. And it's always been a popular sport for fans because of the competitive nature of it. You know, it's two guys out there, and it's you or me, babe. And I think that you sell it on the idea that here's a sport that can build your confidence, teach you how to take care of yourself. And I imagine that a lot of coaches that were smart used that to sell their football players on it. All right, okay, all you think about is us losing weight. Well, I'll tell you what, some of these linemen learn how to maneuver one-on-one, and there's no better way to learn that skill. And the most important thing is to build the confidence in the athlete. You know, that he's stepping out on a mat and facing someone that weighs what he does, and things are pretty even. And so it boils down to, like, who's the toughest guy here? And strength is measured in a lot of ways. I think you talk to a lot of wrestlers, and they would tell you that probably the most influential experience that they've ever had is being part of the wrestling team. I know that I have a lot of really close friends still. There's a group of about 20 guys that meets once a month for breakfast. And they all wrestled for me in the early 70s. And that's Dick McCoy and, you know, and a list of guys that you would know. And it's funny, at the time, Western Hills was a big school. I mean, it was 3,200 students in 3 grades. And, you know, we probably had, I'm going to say about 8 African Americans. And they all were from Sailor Park. And you know what? They all wrestled. And they're 3 of those guys are part of our breakfast group that meets. And if you know the West Side, Patrick's is where we meet. And it's a great bar. And the same is true, and some of you guys are part of the breakfast that we have now with coaches. Similar thing, once a month, we go have breakfast, well, it's a luncheon. And again, these are people that coached together against each other, 40 years ago?
It's more than that.
50.
Yeah, I hate to
60.
say that,
We're getting close to 60.
but yeah, well, we're still here.
Well, you mentioned that you guys were football coaches, and my coach, Dick Yeoman, was a football coach, and I remember we were learning to wrestle from a book.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the coaches. So
Who was his football coach? Who was your wrestling coach?
Dick Yeoman.
Dick Seaman.
Dick Yeoman, yeah.
Yeah.
Mount
So-
Healthy.
Yeah. And
Okay,
then,
thank you.
so you got these books.
Bobby Douglas book. That's
Yes,
what we
exactly
used.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and show you how to do a switch,
Yep.
how to do it. You
Yep.
know. So you guys are like learning on the fly with us. How hard was that to progress your kids to make them competitive, particularly with up north, if you will? The kids have been wrestling for 2 to 3 generations from Cleveland's Toledo area.
We were trying to catch up with Dayton, let alone going on up. We knew it was good up there, but Dayton was ahead of us. And my first year when I came here, we had a sectional, which we only wrestled down to the 4 places, and those 4 went to Dayton and wrestled there for 2 or 3 places at the state, which was, you know, what you got by the number of participants you had. So as we grew down here, we got more people. I
Well,
can't
if
tell
go-
you.
If you go back before that, there was a time when you and I coached that the only
District
person
champ.
that
One.
went was one guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's a
It
sad
was-
story.
there
But
was
that
no-
was
there was no
after. That
sectional.
was gaining
After.
something.
It was-
Right.
Well, with you in particular, you had, I think his name was Chambers.
Yeah.
And the best wrestler I ever had all my coaching career met Chambers for the district title. And
Who's that?
Jeff Linder.
Okay.
Jeff Linder. And
We know the Linder
it was a
name, don't we?
1-point match, and Jeff never got to go anywhere. That was the end of his wrestling career.
Well,
And
I had a kid, Bob Patterson, that was a heavyweight. In those days, it wasn't heavyweight. It wasn't 185. It was unlimited. You know, there was no limit to that.
But you had to weigh a
weight.
minimum 185.
That's right.
Yes,
Yes, you had
yeah.
to.
That was all it
Bob,
was.
Bob had to drink water a lot of times going to a meet to qualify to wrestle as a heavyweight. He'd have to drink water before weigh-in. That's pretty rare. But he met Charlie Gales in the district finals, and I never forget. He was second period, and Charlie was on top, and Bob knew it was over. I knew it was over, and Bob looked up at me and he said, "What do I do, Coach?" I said, "Roll over," because Charlie had a force half in, and he was going to go whether he agreed to go or not. But to protect himself, he needed to roll on through and ended up right there.
And I think that Jack Boeing wrestled Patterson in the semis.
That could very well be.
Yeah, because he met Gales in the finals of the Christmas tournament, which we called the UC Invitational.
Yeah.
UC invitation.
Right.
And that's who he met in the finals. And then the next time he met him was in the, I don't
District.
know, probably the
Yeah.
sectional.
you know, my cardiologist is Dr. Kiriakis, who went to school here, and he wrestled for me. And you were talking about the heavyweight. He weighed about 175, 180, and I probably shouldn't have done it. He was kind of inexperienced, and I let him go against Charlie Gales. And Charlie didn't just beat him point-wise. He beat him physically. I think that was the end of Dr. Kiriakis. In fact, every time I go to see him, he said, "Lepker, I'll get even with you, but it takes me a lifetime."
See,
Well,
that-
your lifetime.
I think-
It's
Yeah,
really,
but
it's
still.
really his coach. That was the coach's philosophy.
Yeah.
Well, I think they didn't think that high school kids would have the vast difference. Now, you're
Wait.
talking about Charlie Gales. Charlie Gales was 300 pounds plus. But, and here's the thing, and you look at the pictures that I've given Denny and of it, he was not a built, cut kid like Guilford. Guilford looked like Adonis.
Oh, God, yes.
Charlie Gales looked like your fat neighbor. Okay? But Charlie Gales was a great athlete. He had come up through Cincinnati Public and had gone through all that gymnastics training, the old Turner societies and all those things that were part of Cincinnati phys ed history. Charlie do all that. Charlie could do a kip at 300 pounds, just roll back
Kick up.
and up to his feet.
Ron,
Well,
did he play football?
yes.
Okay.
Middle guard.
Did he go on to college?
Yes, he went to Southern University in Louisiana.
Thank
Played
you.
down there.
He lives in Louisiana.
Yeah,
still.
he's still down there.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing about it was he was a lazy student. He wasn't a great student. So everybody around here was, first of all, everybody, Ohio State, Miami, all of them poo-pooed him because he was 5'10", maybe 5'11", and no 300 pounds. Well, we don't need a guy like that. Well, and we had some people from the South on our staff, and one of the guys said, "Well, I'll get Southern to come up here," and they aren't a stickler on academics. You know, he's going to have a degree from a good high school, but I don't think he had much over a 2.3. I know he didn't have a 2.5 because became the wrestling coach at Miami, and I couldn't get him in at Miami. I would have taken him and said, to Bill Mallory, "Bill, if you want him, you can look at him," because Bill was the football guy and I was assistant. But, that's how he got down south. They didn't have any wrestling, he just played football, but he played it well. And he's still down there. Maybe 5 years ago, Princeton took him into the Hall of Fame.
We had him up here, I can't remember what year it was. We had the Coaches Classic at the Riverfront Coliseum. Remember that year?
Yeah.
And we invited back the previous state champions, Charlie came back for that. And that was the thing that surprised me, is that how much smaller he is today
Yeah.
than he was then. He was smaller than I was, and that's before I'm
Yeah, he's probably,
gargantuan.
Yeah.
And he was probably 200 pounds.
That's it.
That was about it.
when I came back and presented him to the Princeton Hall of Fame, and he was right around 200 pounds.
Yeah.
You know, and but again, he would have been a good wrestler at 200 pounds
Oh, yeah.
because he was a really, really good athlete. I mean, he had great balance, and like you said, when he set about and got you down on the mat, he was going to turn you.
Yes, he was.
And when he turned you, it was a lights were out. You know, go ahead and count. But you know, it was one of those things. He was a. Here's the thing. I just share something personally. He wasn't the best wrestler in our room. Not by a long shot. The best wrestler was a guy by the name of Greg Harvey, who was our fullback and had been a wrestler for me years before at 165. And Charlie would go with him. And he'd just pull Charlie off, push him, bring the leg up, ride him. You know, he frustrated the heck out of Charlie. And I expected him to be a state champion because he was better than Guilford was, and Guilford had come up and been fourth up there.
Right.
So I thought at 165, I've got a state champion. Well, they're wrestling over there, and Gales gets a takedown on Harvey and pins him. And, you know, it's going to happen. You go underneath the 300-pound guy. He was so mad, he came out, punched the mat, missed the mat, and hit the floor. Broke his hand. Didn't wrestle. He was a senior. And he was our head and shoulders. He was our best wrestler. So all year long, I'm feeling like I'm playing with house money every time Gales wins because I didn't think he was the best. I didn't think I was going to have a state champion.
That brings an interesting thing up. How much internal competition did you guys have on your teams? In other words, everybody, we all talk about it, but maybe everybody doesn't know. In wrestling, there's a wrestle off. You have to earn your way onto the mat. What role did that competition play on your team? In my teams, I was having to bring in referees a little bit later than this, but I had to bring a referee in to handle wrestle-offs because I didn't want to get in the middle between two really good kids. And I had years when that was the problem, is that we had a lot of good kids, and somebody was being kept off the mat. And the guy that was off the mat was almost just as good, maybe better. But did you have that experience?
Well, I had we all have weak spots. I have a weak spot, I guess, and it was wrestle-off time, and my 38-pounder, he was sick. So the boy behind him, I didn't think he was that good. So the next day, I said, well, I know my rule is that you should get to wrestle because so-and-so didn't show up that
Right.
day. And Steve looked at me and said, Coach, you made the rule. You're going to stick with it. I get to wrestle. It's your rule, and you're going to stick with it. Not, I kind of heads around. But he was right, and I had to stick with it. And he made it to the state. And he was a tough kid. And
Is he a lawyer today?
he stood up for his rights. He should be, shouldn't he? I kind of lost track of him, but he was really a good kid. But yeah, we all kind of flaunt our rules once in a while. And,
I had wrestle-offs on Wednesday
Yep.
for weekend matches, Friday, Saturday match. I had on Wednesday. My rule was, though, because you weren't going to come in there and wrestle off a guy and be 10 pounds heavier. So you had to be within 10 of the weight you're challenging at. And then, and everybody was up for challenge. And so you'd say it on Tuesday. Who's challenging at 103? Okay, you guys are, and we'd set it up. And we'd come in and do the challenges before we ever started practice. It wasn't like I was going to, some coaches said, well, after practice, we'll do the challenge. Well, after one of my practices, you didn't really feel like wrestling 8 minutes or 9 minutes. So, but that's the way we did it, and I don't think it ever hurt us. I think maybe we had a guy that if he'd have gone down and held the weight and kept it all year, he could have made it into the lineup. But those guys didn't want to do it. If they woke up and they were under 10, they wanted a challenge. But if they had to work out Tuesday to get under 10 to wrestle on Wednesday, not too many of them wanted to do it. I wrestled, let me say one other thing. I had 3 teams. I was really lucky. I had a freshman team, I had a JV, a reserve team, which was the guys that lost the wrestle off, and I had the varsity. And we were lucky enough to we worked at filling all those weight classes, because when I got hired, Bill King told me, he says, I don't want a football coach running this wrestling program and you got 5 or 6 kids and you work out with them and everything. He said, I want a full-blown team. And I said, that's what you'll have.
Well, they had
We had
11
that.
weight classes back
What?
then. They only had 11 weight
11
classes.
weight classes,
3,
yes.
12,
Yeah.
20, 27.
So I had about 40 guys on the team. And sometimes you had to hoop and holler to get them around. I would have a 35-pounder. It might go up to 42 or whatever it was, because we had 2 of those. And I'd say, hey, guys, to have a full team, you can go wherever you want, And I'll go up, coach. And I'm like you. Those kids were great kids. They're a different breed of pup, a wrestler is.
Oh, for sure.
He's a different breed.
Greg, you were on that Mount Healthy team. Tell us just a little bit. Wasn't it a great team, one of the best teams ever came out of Cincinnati?
Well, that was early. We were district champs at Princeton, at the little junior high, or down in Sharonville, and we had actually 5 former future coaches.
Was Listerman on the team?
Gary Listerman
Yep.
was our heavyweight. Kip Keller was our 65. Kevin was our 20-pounder. Tommy Ritz was our...
Pearson, did Pearson?
No, he's younger.
Yeah,
But we
younger.
had 5 kids
Pearson's
that guys ended up being either high school coaches in the area that, went on to matriculate and come back and, like you said, stick with the community, with the fraternity, if you will.
One of my wrestlers at Coleraine was the guy that's filming this show right now. Denny Dupps is, I guess he's around here somewhere hiding, I guess, but he was, we've been together. He's not only my best friend, he does everything for me, takes care of me. He's just a great guy, super guy.
Well, one other thing, interestingly, you talked about the UC Invitational, but we also had some local invitationals. And Princeton had Invitational, Finneytown had Invitational, St. X had Invitational, and Indian Hill had an Invitational. So all 4 of you guys developed, tournaments for the local wrestlers to get, and talk about that a little bit, because that's not an easy task.
Well, Ron was the first one.
Yeah.
Ron had the first one, and I was a little bit after him, and I tried to invite the best teams in Cincinnati. And of course, I never did win my invitational, never did. But I always had the good teams, good competition. And well, my AD was a football coach, and I think he wanted a wrestling program, but at the invitational, he brought the trophy down to give the champion of my tournament to the winning coach. And when he came down, the trophy was this big. And the coach out there was a pretty tough guy. And in fact, the math teacher at the high school was going to present it. And he brought it back to me and he said, Ron, I'm not taking that over to give him that trophy. I said, well, just tell him that Coach Lepker's the other one didn't come in on time. So I got off the hook there, but yeah, we don't want to go big in wrestling. That was his football and instrumental music, and that was here. I won't mention his name, but anyway.
So wrestling was kind of the Bad News Bears kind of thing.
Well, yeah, first he wanted a program, and then when I got, my dual match score in front of the Enquirer, of course, we owned the Enquirer, but he didn't, he said, no, Ron, instrumental music and football, that's our program. We don't want to get out of sight, no.
Let me tell you a quick story on that, in Indian Hill. I happen to be the president of the Coaches Association, and the big battle that we had was to, you know, popularize the sport, get people in the stands, let them know what it's all about. And so we felt like we need to go where wrestling is big. And so we tapped into Indian Hill, and Linder flew. Ron was just you was.
UDF, he owned UDF. He was just a great guy too. Mr. Linder, Mr. Robert Linder.
Yeah, so he flew. Oh, that's right. He flew the two Inquirer and the Post writers, and me and Ron to Cleveland to watch Maple Heights wrestle Garfield Heights at Garfield Heights. And then we went out to dinner, and they met with the Plain Dealer writers and our writers to like get us back on the right page and get us some coverage. And when you fly out of Lunkin in a jet that goes like straight up, it doesn't go down the runway. You've been in a jet.
Speaking of, didn't
Yeah, he took my
didn't
team.
you take your team up there?
I said, Mr. Linder, I would love to scrimmage Maple Heights, who was a perennial power in the state of Ohio. He said, why don't you? I said, well, Cleveland's quite a ways from here. And he said, well, they have your kids down there at 3:30. And he had little snacks for us. I took about 15 kids, put them on the jet. 20 minutes we're up there. We scrimmaged Maple Heights. Mm-hmm. We didn't do very well, but we got to go to Maple. And then he took the coach and the families out to dinner. He was a great guy.
That was Milkovich's, the Milkovich family was coaching up at Maple Heights.
Yeah, when I left and got finished dinner, and I turned to Mike and I said, Mike Milkovich, and I said, Coach, had a great experience. He said, hope you learned something.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the dad or the son?
Oh, the dad.
The dad, yeah.
Big
But
dad
he
was a
he
big
was,
Mike.
yeah, he was about as, had no filter.
Unfriendly.
Because
Wow.
we beat, he was, his son was wrestling at Kent State.
That was Mike.
No, Michael went to Michigan State. This was
Tommy went to Michigan State.
Michigan
yeah,
State,
Tommy's the one.
Michigan State.
This was Mike went to Kent,
Yeah.
and we were wrestling. And Joe Bagala was the 35-year, 40-year, 50-year coach at Kent State, and had been going forever. And so he wrestled Mike. Young Mike was wrestling up there. And so his dad came down and he won. It was at our place, had a nice crowd. But my 90-pounder, maybe it was 177, but I think it was 90, pinned the kid from Kent State that had been undefeated. But it was a reverse pin. He just rocked back on him and got him underneath, and the kid pinned himself, turn like that. So he's over just raising hell with me. You shouldn't take that. That's so bad. And I'm saying, Coach, you're right. You're right. I agree with you. I said, but I'll take anything I can get. I'll take anything I can get.
Point's a point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But those old guys were like it. I want to tell you one interesting story, and this was back the beginning of the beginnings. And this is when I was wrestling at Miami. And we wrestled UC. Glenn Sample was the wrestling coach at UC, and Jay Fry was the wrestling coach at Miami, who was also assistant football coach. We're wrestling there. We don't have an official. There's no official. So Glenn and Jay said, we'll do it. And Glenn said, Jay, you can do it. And Jay said, no, we'll just stay on the bench. And he said, I got an older kid, and we'll correct anything. So they would go in, and he told us before the match, don't worry about when you got to take down, when you get pinned. Don't worry about anything else like that. We'll straighten that up. Don't worry about arguing or anything. So we went through. We went through. Then those two got together because they'd made notes, and they said, that really wasn't escape. He never got off. So they adjusted the mat, and I think it wasn't a blowout. It was like maybe 24-17 or something like that. But they agreed this was it. And so that was the way you had and that was college. That was at college. They couldn't get any officials.
That's great.
So they just do it. But what I'm saying is that the coaches were more interested in the sport than in their particular record. They'd say, don't be arguing about that. Which we all saw as we came in there, how intense it got. That wasn't good. He never got his arms up. And you'd argue like that, and pretty soon you got the idea that, hey, it'll all come out in the wash. Just get it done. And that's kind of the way it was.
Well, you mentioned Glenn Sample. I think we'd be remiss in not talking about what a great official and gentleman he was for the sport, at UC, and just being an official for the high school. And
He recruited so many officials.
Yeah.
He was running a class at UC to train guys to become officials, because there just not very many. And I know that Ron was an official, you were an official. I reffed for a couple years, and you were talking about it.
Yeah.
You'd have practice, and then you'd have to take off, go someplace and officiate. Or you'd have a match on Friday, or that didn't happen, a match on Saturday morning or afternoon, then run to another match that night.
And then,
And there were some wild times over those situations back in the day. You can remember some of the old Eastern Hills League tournaments that almost resulted in me being attacked. Me and two other, Jim Mahan and somebody else, were working your league tournament, and the fans got a little bit upset over a call that.
Was that Ken Root? Was Ken Root involved in that?
I don't think so.
Well, he had a heart attack, and there was like a brawl.
That was it. That was in the Hamilton County tournament at Reading. Yeah, he did. He went to go after a kid up
in the stands.
Up in the stands, went over, and Reading has a gym floor that was down below, and you had to climb up a wall and jump over a rail. Well, Root was all the way up, had a hold of the top rail, trying to pull himself up to go get a kid in the stands that had made some comment about him, and all at once he just let go and came back. Unfortunately, the mat was there, and the trainers came over and they looked at him, and the next thing you know, they were carting him out. And yeah, he did. He had a heart attack. He was a wild man. But anyway, the fans almost got the officials in that one. We had a police escort that got us out of the gym and into the athletic director's office, where we changed into street clothes, and the police posted a guard outside the door because there were people outside from another school, I won't tell you which one it was, that were trying to get to the officials.
Well, I got just one story about the man that's building this session, Dennis Stubbs. He came into the locker room, we were cleaning up, getting ready to go home up in Dayton, and he said, Ron, he said, this is my last match. I'm not officiating anymore. I said, well, what's going on, Denny? He said, I made a call, it was a slam. I made a call and disqualified a kid. He said that his dad has got a gun and he's waiting in the parking lot for me. I said, well, it's time to hang it up. That's the time to maybe consider doing something else. But
that was kind of prevalent. You get, because it's so close, the parents or the brothers, older brothers, get around the younger brothers, or taking something about that. So that was part of growing up and part of doing it. And
sometimes they were sitting in the chair instead of the coach.
Yes, yes.
Older brothers.
You had that, and
I had a match that one of the parents. I guess I made some kind of comment there. A kid had a twisted ankle, and there was a snowstorm outside, and I said something. I said he's only got a twisted ankle. Can you take him over there and work on his ankle? And he took that the wrong way. I didn't
Yeah.
say get the hell off the mat or anything, I just said, could you move? And he wanted to wait for me outside, and I said, now settle down, you know, it's just, we can talk about this. No, I want, finally I just said, wait for me, I'll be there. But he didn't show. But, yeah, those things happen.
We got a few more minutes left, but let's talk about some of the wrestlers. Was Daniels, Mike Daniels, our first state champion from down here, and some of the other really good wrestlers
Mike Daniels from
Mike Daniels from Hughes, public high school.
That goes way back, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, and so,
Well, Joe Cranen, too, was another one from Hughes High School. Remember
Yeah.
Joe?
yeah,
American Indian?
I coached his brother.
but he got beat. Joe did, yeah. But, I mean, there's
You coached
several
Joe's
names.
brother?
Yeah.
Because I had his other brother. I had Charlie. Charlie Cranen wrestled
Yes.
for me, went to the state, went on and played football at Kent. But the first state placer was Charlie Guilford, 1966 or 7, so it's close I'm going to get. And the first state champion down there was Charlie Gales,
Right.
and that was 69. 68 or 69.
68.
Yeah, 68ers.
But there's a few other, you guys throw out some names.
I'll tell you something. Back in the 60s, wrestling was pretty good in the public eye.
Yeah.
You know, you had Hughes and Withrow and Woodward and West High and Taft. There wasn't a weak
No.
team in there. And you had some athletes and good wrestlers, good coaches, and it was a battle. I'll tell you what.
That's one of the.
Let me just finish this
Yeah.
and then up. My wife did her student teacher with Napoleon McCollum's wife at Lincoln Heights. And Napoleon McCollum was the wrestling coach at Lincoln Heights, and he was the first coach that I ever faced in competition. And then, of course, his son went on to the Naval Academy and won the Heisman Trophy
Right.
and wrestled for a guy named Ed Morris,
Yeah.
who probably was the dean of coaches
Yep.
in Cincinnati.
Yep.
And he just was, but he had a philosophy. He taught on the top, man, and turn them over and pin them. And when you wrestled people that he coached, they pinned you.
Mike Daniels scared my kid had to wrestle. He was scared of him physically. He was intimidated by him. He would shake when he had to meet him because he said Daniels had the tightest tight waist he couldn't imagine how one arm could go around the waist and be that tight. And Daniels would use that tight waist and jam you down in and slap a half on, you know, and you wanted to go. You know,
And this is Mike Daniels.
yeah.
Yeah, I first met Mike Daniels. He was a special ed student at High Knoll Junior High School, and I saw this kid run across the parking lot, and I looked at his calves, and I went, "Holy mackerels! Look at this kid's calves! You know, he was so strong. He only knew one move: stand up.
Yeah.
You couldn't take him down, and you couldn't ride him,
Right.
and so he'd win."
Yeah.
And I can remember I had a kid named Kent Jackson who was a pretty good athlete. In fact, probably still holds the records for the yards gained in the All-Star football series. He was a hell of a running back for West High. And we had a match one night at our place, and he had to wrestle Jeff Kelly, state champ, Harrison, and Mike Daniels, state champ, Hughes.
Yep.
It was a try. And so his two opponents in competition were both state champs.
Yep.
That's a tough night.
Yeah, that's right.
He didn't win a match that night.
You know, it's interesting. I've heard this a couple times. Guys talking about, well, this kid did this, and his brother or brothers did this and this and this. And I suspect we all experienced that situation where you had a brother, and then he'd be followed by younger brothers, and it made a continuum. I had twins, and they were identical twins. And those two kids could actually switch weights before weigh-ins because you didn't really have certified weights during the regular season. And one would feel bad and he would kind of slack off during practice and his weight would go up and his brother would weigh in at the lighter weight. They wrestled at 132 and 138, I think. And then they could switch.
Because I wrestled Hittingers.
Yeah, Hittingers.
Yeah.
Yeah, Matt and Mark Hittinger.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's,
Well, I married a bus driver that had 8 kids. Top that one. And six of them wrestled for me.
oh,
The Carahers.
oh,
And there are more pins by the Carahers than any family that's ever wrestled in, well,
probably
in the places I was.
that many kids.
Oh,
geez.
I mean, they were pretty tough guys.
Well, they probably were tough.
And I was with them.
Rolling around the
I
house.
was with them 2 days ago for the whole day. That's an experience.
Did any of you fellows lose any of the kids in the Vietnam conflict? I lost 3 of my wrestlers in Vietnam. And the one kid he was almost like my son. We were really close. And
No,
what a sad time that was.
I don't remember any of mine.
His name was Duke Schmees. I don't know if any of you remember him, but Denny Duff's the guy that's filming this. He wrestled with him, and he wanted to be a doctor, and it was just a sad situation.
Well, you talk about Vietnam. I had an option when I came out of college, either to go into the National Teacher Corps or the Marine Corps. And I had a commission in the Marine Corps as second lieutenant in the infantry. And I had a life expectancy of a month and a half. No, a week and a half. And I was scheduled to report to Quantico in January of '66, and then right over, and looking at a week and a half expected to live. And all of a sudden, Washington called me at my job. I've been on my job, worked with Foster Wheeler in finance, and said, we'd like you to report for the National Teacher Corps and do your training in the south side of Chicago.
Quickly.
Yeah, so I said, Dad, I gotta do that. And so that's how I got into teaching, and that's how I ended up in Cincinnati. And I started at Heinold Junior High School, where Dave Parker was a student of mine at the same time Mike Daniels. They were both classmates. And I lived. Thank God.
Yeah. So, well, we got anything else here? It's pretty much.
I have the guys that I could remember coaching in '64 and '65, and I thought I'd maybe read them off, and it might stir some memories. Now, this is just my memories. I did get some of it out of the records at Princeton. These were the guys that we wrestled against. That's how I remember. First of all, not first in any order, I just wrote them down as I could remember them. I remember Tom Hollick at Loveland, who was an assistant football coach and started wrestling over there. John Parker was who I remembered from Moeller, who was an assistant football coach and started wrestling.
Ron, can I just break in a minute? Did John Parker wrestle?
Not that I know
No,
of.
he would come down. I don't think he knew much about wrestling. He won my tournament every year.
Yeah.
He didn't know anything about wrestling. He said, well, just come down, pick up your trophy again, you know.
Well, he's coached at Moeller.
Yeah, he had some studs, yes.
But before John was there, John turned Moeller around, actually. I thought Moeller came up when John took
A
over.
lot.
And John led inspirationally. If John told you to run through that plate glass wall over there, you would run through the wall deliriously happy because he just was that kind of a guy. He was a defensive coordinator in football, went coach at UC for a while.
Yep.
And then went back and became the district defensive coordinator at Marymount. And boy, Marymont's football team, for their size, was really dominant. Most of it was due to John Parker.
John,
Good guy.
but his organization came from football. He ran a wrestling program and demanded, because you could,
Yep.
at a Catholic school, you could demand, hey, don't worry about what time practice is over.
Yeah.
We'll call you to come get your kids.
Yep.
Now, you can do that in a public school. If you said you were done at 5:30, you better be done at 5:30, or you'll have some mother yelling at you and calling you at 11:45 at night. But he ran it that way and did a good job. The next guy that came to mind was Dick Seoman. And Dick was the head coach, football coach at Mount Healthy, and did it for the same thing. He wanted to get you guys started over there. And Art Davies, do any of you remember him at Marymount?
Sure, Marymount.
Okay, well, he did a good job, but he had a stand-in. He had a friend, or it might have been somebody on the staff there, that had wrestled in New England.
He was the principal. The principal,
Was
I
that-
can't
was
think of
that-
his name, but he was a great coach.
Yes, he
Great
was,
coach.
because he brought the legs in, and our kids were, why, you're gonna kill me, so, I had to do I had to do probably half an hour every day working on the legs with my kids, just to make sure you didn't get panicked and you knew you could get out of there. But Art Davies was at Marymount. Joe Galat was ahead of us by about 3 years, but he was at Talawanda. And he was, we were classmates, teammates, and
He coached
everything.
in Miami, didn't he?
Huh? He coached at Miami, yes, but he started Talawanda.
I think they won 65, they won the district down here.
Yeah.
Talawanda did.
Well, didn't Greg Abrams?
Greg
Wrestled for him,
Abrams
wrestled for
wrestled
him.
for him,
I
yes.
thought so.
Yes, I remember wrestling him, and I remember having a good kid by the name of Jerry Chance who wrestled him and spent the whole damn night trying to switch him on the hand that stops right here. He said, Coach, I can get it in, I'm in there. I said, yeah, but there's nothing between. So it's funny, I don't tell it very often because here's a handicapped guy, but I tell you what, he was a good wrestler. He was a very good wrestler.
And he did not give he did not expect
No, he didn't want anything.
any exception.
Yeah.
And his crossface
Yeah, it was
usually
brutal.
left you with stars in your head. Because
Yeah.
he could
His
hit
arms
a
stopped
short
right
crossface
about here.
and it would take your head off.
I think he was all-city or honorable mention in Dayton and in Cincinnati. 'cause
Probably.
He wrestled.
Could have been, yeah,
Both,
because
Talawanda
they
wrestled
were,
both.
there was nobody down here when Joe was coaching, because I was still in school, and I'd come over and help him wrestle at, run practice, because I was a GA. Football was over, I was over there helping. Bill Hoffeld was the coach at Norwood. He was a football coach, started it. Toby McCormick at Reading was a football coach, I believe.
Yes. He was my best friend.
Middletown.
Was he?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Toby?
Toby,
Sure.
your best friend.
Yeah, when he lived in town.
Oh, yeah, I was
Kentucky,
gonna
yeah.
say, yeah.
He was kid wrestling in Kentucky.
We did more wrestling on my living room floor,
Granby Roll.
even though he was like a whole lot larger than I was.
The other guy was Jack Gordon, was the head coach at Middletown at that time, and started wrestling. And he really helped us out a lot, publicizing, because he had a radio show as the head football coach at Middletown all year long.
Wow.
And so during wrestling season, he'd be talking about there's a great kid, so-and-so, and he's going to be up here wrestling. And he just publicized it, and really helpful. I remember him good. I got you at 65, Ron. That's when I remembered you at Coleraine. Is that right? Or was it?
It's pretty close, yeah. I think that's the year 65 I came to Indian Hill. So it would probably been, I graduated in 62, so 63, 64 would have been a little closer probably.
Okay, well, I just didn't have, I had another football coach, Sam Ritter from Eaton,
I know Sam.
Dick Karen from
Green Hills.
Aiken.
Well, Aiken first,
Aiken before Green Hills.
Right.
And Elder, somebody helped me on this and said it was Bob Concoli.
No, Bob Ritter. Was it Ritter?
There was a Ritter at.
I remember,
The Ritter
I
that
remember every
wrestled,
time
but
we went over there and
Bob,
wrestled him, it was a priest.
There was a what was Bob's last name? Well, when I coached.
Was it with you?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm talking about when I was early, before you started over there. And we used to go over to have to go wrestle out in that auxiliary gym, which was just another building. And it was always a priest. He always met us, always took us down there, always sat along, didn't have much to say to them, but it was 12 or 15 kids and that priest, and that's all I remembered. And he was a good guy. And, you know, you didn't have any problems.
okay. Bob Ritter came after him.
Okay. Well, these are just ones I can't remember anybody from Taft. And yet I know
Chris
Taft. Huh?
Chris Shoemaker.
Okay, see,
What about Chris Schumacher?
That's what we just
Yeah.
said.
Yeah, but Chris didn't start
A little later.
until-
No, he didn't
Oh,
start.
okay. Jim Brown, does that,
I started before Chris Schumacher.
See, yeah.
Taft.
I can't, Ed Morris, I remember
I
you.
started in
But I think
68.
Ed was at several
No,
different
started
places.
coaching.
He may have been at Taft at some time, Ed Morris. Fairfield was
Oh,
Ron.
no,
Masonic.
Ed Morris was at Hughes.
I know, that's where I remember him placing all those kids, but I remember him being all over down there.
Yeah, he also coached, he coached at Withrow.
Yeah, see,
After Hughes.
After Hughes, he went to Withrow.
And then
He
he
had a-
coached at
He had
Milford.
a state placer then, and then ended up at Milford.
Yeah,
Started the program
he had
at Milford.
McCollum. He coached the McCollum boy.
Yeah, I think you're right, yeah,
Yeah,
well, they were at Milford.
yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
exactly.
The other, Frank Schott,
Yeah.
came in and made a real big difference. I mean, Oak Hills was just kind of lumbering around, and wanted to get.
Frank's in the University of Cincinnati Hall of Fame, Athletic Hall of Fame. He's the only wrestler there, because they don't have a wrestling program, but Frank's in the Hall of Fame down there.
Another guy that should be in the Hall of Fame, I imagine he is, Ron Masonic. Ron came to Fairfield out of high school, out of college, and never went anyplace else.
Tremendous coach. Probably one
Oh,
of the best
great coach.
coaches.
He's a teammate of mine.
Yeah.
I've known Ron Masonic's camps were where I took my grandson, who became a state
I
champion.
worked that camp too, Ron, yeah.
Yeah, and
I
I
worked
mean,
it
I
too.
took him up there because I knew what you're going to get there. Yeah,
Top of the mountain or something like that?
it was at Camp America.
Camp America.
Yeah,
That's
that's
where
right.
it is.
He never, I don't think he paid me, but he
Probably
let
not.
me bring my kids up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I don't the first couple of years he was up there, they had that camp. They had a mat out on the ground. You know, this was Galat, Jay Fry, trying to get stuff going. So they built him a pavilion that was big enough, I think, for 3 mats for the wrestlers, and they had it out there. And so Joe said, Ron, I built you this pavilion. I can't pay you to. Ron would be up there all summer long. Hey, he'd have his kids too. I mean, his kids were up there and were counselors and did a great job. So it was a good place to go.
It was a good time for Ron to hit at Fairfield.
Yeah.
Because Fairfield was big and it was good athletes.
Yep.
Tough kids.
Right.
And Ron just fit right in and just beat everybody's up.
Yeah,
Well, we wrestled them in their cafeteria. They didn't even wrestle in the gym to
No.
start with. They pushed the tables in the cafeteria way and set the mat up, and we wrestled in the cafeteria.
I could never get on their schedule. It was always, it was hard. That was one of the things that became an interesting element, is the schedules year by year. And people got into a particular groove, and you didn't want to change things. And you were talking about your tournament. We started a tournament the following year at Finneytown, and you were talking about trying to get the best teams in town. Decided the thing to do was get the top team from the from each of the leagues in town and used them in the tournament. And we never won our tournament either. But the key to all of this was you were getting out and getting in front of the public. You were trying to make people understand how important this sport was for the kids that were participating. And that was a thing that was so different. This was a great time for athletics in general because, well, kids didn't have anything else. Think about how many clubs and organizations there were in your schools at the time when you were starting your programs. There were all kinds of things. The kids gravitated to the school. And so this was a time when sports were exploding and wrestling took advantage of that. Kids were still interested in being something at their school. And as you go further down the road and you find there's more and more things for kids to do and get involved with, the number of kids, the number of participants in wrestling drops off. You see it today very clearly.
Why do you think it drops off? It's easy. It's the hardest sport there is.
There's that, certainly.
Even to practice.
But
Dude,
there's easy to be successful using a Game Boy, and you don't have to put out any effort.
it's not the same as kicking
In order to
somebody's
be,
ass.
in order to be successful
Doesn't feel
through wrestling, you had to actually go do something.
Yeah,
But
get
it's,
your ass kicked.
And now you look at what's happening in wrestling, and you see the fastest part of the growth in wrestling's in girls wrestling. In Ohio, that's the case right now.
Yeah.
You guys remember
It's a world of difference.
the Abel and Sager periods at UC?
No, sure.
Stan Abel and
My brother,
Mike Sager?
my brother was Stan's assistant. My brother Gene.
I refereed the Oklahoma UC match. And I caught hell from both of them. It was Stan and Mike. Mike was with UC, Stan was at Oklahoma. And they were both my friends. And they were both giving me a hard way to go. It was fun.
Did Sager leave? Because I helped him get the Colorado job. Did Sager leave and they stopped wrestling at UC, or did somebody take it after that?
Well, he went from here to Colorado.
Yeah, well, I was.
And he had some good teams.
Yes.
Yeah,
And,
Trianos.
They dropped the program, Ron. They
Oh,
dropped.
Colorado? Yeah, I know that. That was after we left.
I think-
I know that happened to him because I can tell you an interesting statistic that was in the paper up there because he had done a good job at wrestling. And the statistic was that it cost as much to do the new football offices and the new office for the guy that came in from the Boston Patriots that followed us when we
Do the
got
football,
fired.
okay.
Yeah. And when he came in, that cost as much as the wrestling program. Cut off the wrestling program, took that money out of the budget to make this guy an office and have.
And what was his name? Was he any good?
Was the guy? Yeah, he was a national champion at Oklahoma before Barry Switzer. He was the guy that Switzer
Really?
replaced because he went from Oklahoma to New England.
Did he bring in, who's the guy that could have been the best? Who's the quarterback that, at UC and he coached for the Bengals? Or did he play quarterback for the Bengals?
You see it,
Greg
quarterback.
Cook.
Greg Cook.
What was his name?
Did he bring in Greg Cook?
Oh, Greg Cook.
Do you know?
No. Greg Cook still lived until he died, lived in Chillicothe. He went back to Chillicothe and had radio.
What a
show
great quarterback.
He was a
He's an
great
artist.
quarterback, yeah.
But they said what he needed, though they didn't do it that time, he needed Tommy John surgery. His shoulder was just, said you looked like scrambled eggs. And if they could have done Tommy John surgery, he might have continued to play on.
Well, back to wrestling.
Yeah.
Do we have anything else you guys want to add to this, or we think we're kind of ready for?
Well, Mike, I might mention this about Mike Sager. We got to be very close, and he put up after they dropped the program at Colorado, he went into real estate and really did well. His personality and he was a real close buddy of mine, and he fought the cancer a long time, but they finally got him, and
What kind of cancer do you have?
it was colon cancer, and we thought, I went out several times, and we thought we had it licked, and it just didn't come to be, but he made, after he left Colorado, he made a lot of money in the real estate business. Lived in Boulder. And,
I'm gonna add something, having been there. Talk about being at the right place at the right time. If you're in real estate in Boulder, it had zero population growth because of the water and everything. There was no new home starts. You came into Boulder, you had to buy an existing home or live somewhere else. So anybody's house went up for sale. You got a captive audience.
the real
buddy.
estate was out of sight. I mean,
Oh, yeah, well, we doubled what we paid when we came there. We didn't, I didn't have a lot of great memories from there, but when we came there, we bought a nice house for $70,000, and when we left, we sold it for $158,000. So, yeah, I mean, it was because of zero population growth. No new starts, you couldn't get a building permit, you couldn't get water permit, you couldn't get any of those kind of things.
Well, I think we've covered all the.
Yeah. That's about all the time we have for today's program. Hope this information is helpful to anyone else out there interested in amateur wrestling and the rich history we've had here in Cincinnati. And really want to thank all the panel participants. This is kind of information that just doesn't exist anywhere. It's in your brains and it's coming out here. And
That's part of the problem. You notice how many of us couldn't remember names?
yeah.
It's a challenge.
Well, hopefully we can assemble another group of coaches, and maybe you guys can help out also for interested in continuous series of the guys in the 80s, which you were still part
different
of.
levels, different
Yeah,
levels.
80s, 90s, and 2000s. So we can make comments. Anybody has comments or suggestions that are watching this, please get in touch with our producer, Denny Dupps, as Ron's mentioned several times, and I'll read the last. He's executive director of the Indian Hill Television Network, and his email and address and description below will be included. So thank anybody and all of you for being here, and thank anybody and all of you for watching.
Well, thank you, Greg. You
Thanks,
did a
Greg.
great job. Great
Yeah.
job.
Thanks for having me.
Ron and Dave and Murph, great seeing you guys. Great seeing you.
Thank you.
All right.
Good to be
Been
seen.
fun.
Can we turn this off now?